Welcome everyone to our first event of World Aquatic Animal Day. My name is Miranda Eisen and I'm delighted to be moderating today's panel, Unseen, Unprotected, and Underwater, Perspectives on Aquatic Animals. We're so happy to have you today. Thank you for joining us. We'll hear from three panelists who will explore this theme through different lenses and perspectives. We'll also have time for a Q&A at the end, so please feel free to drop any questions you have into the Q&A chat at any point during the session. And to get us started, I'm very excited to introduce Hana Nabulsi, who will provide some background on World Aquatic Animal Day and help ground us in why we're here today, to reflect on our relationships with aquatic animals. Hana Nabulsi is a recent graduate of the George Washington University Law School. Hana has a strong commitment to animal law, and while in law school, served as co-president of the George Washington Student Animal Legal Defense Fund chapter, and as a research assistant to the Assistant Dean for Animal Legal Education at GW Law. Kathy Hessler, who is a co-founder of World Aquatic Animal Day, along with Amy P. Wilson, both of whom will be featured on our evening panel, which we encourage you to attend later today. Hana remains actively engaged in the animal law field through continued collaboration with the GW Animal Law Program, including World Aquatic Animal Day. And with that, Hana, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Miranda. Hi, everyone. Welcome to World Aquatic Animal Day, and thank you all so much for being here. As Miranda mentioned, this is our first panel of the day, and this panel's topic is Unseen, Unprotected, and Underwater, Perspectives on Aquatic Animals. I am Hana Nabulsi, and I am very excited to be here with all of you today and to have the opportunity to introduce WAD. First, I would like to mention that WAD is a collective effort made possible by the Animal Legal Education Initiative at the George Washington University Law School, the Whale Sanctuary Project, Farm Sanctuary, and the GW Law Student Chapter of the Animal Legal Defense Fund. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors. So what is World Aquatic Animal Day, or WAD as we like to call it? WAD is an annual global day of action every April 3rd that is dedicated to raising awareness about the often forgotten and systematically exploited lives of aquatic animals. Every April 3rd, communities around the world come together to learn from experts, explore the unique lives and environments of aquatic animals, and engage in a day of action to protect them through education, legal and policy initiatives, and outreach. WAD was co-founded in 2020 by the executive director and co-founder of the Animal Law Reform South Africa, Amy P. Wilson, and the assistant dean for animal legal education at GW Law School, Kathy Hessler. For the past 6 years, WAD has created a space for aquatic animal education, awareness, and action, and I would like to thank the sponsors and founders for bringing us here today. So why do we need WAD? Well, like all animals, aquatic animals are considered property under the law. So they're excluded from most legal protections around the world, but they're exploited in many industries spanning from food production, scientific research, medicine, and entertainment. Even those living in their natural habitats endure relentless human interference from overfishing, pollution, and habitat destruction. WAD is an important day of exposing the vast harm that aquatic animals experience. Our society widely perceives aquatic animals as unintelligent, with few capacities compared to other animals. They're often seen as abundant, and the scope of harm inflicted upon them remains largely unrealized due to their invisibility outside of our everyday view. WAD is an important day of exposing this harm by raising the visibility of aquatic animals, understanding them, respecting them, and learning how we can protect them. Today is about truly seeing aquatic animals not as invisible resources, but as individuals deserving of respect and moral consideration. This year's WAD theme, The Human Gaze, Impacts on Aquatic Animals, highlights how the intricate nature of aquatic lives remain hidden beneath the water's surface, leading to a disconnect that diminishes our empathy and our sense of responsibility. Compounding this issue is the pervasive belief that aquatic animals exist in infinite numbers, reinforcing the idea that they are mere resources for human use that will never run out. The less we recognize their individuality and the more we frame them as commodities, the harder it becomes to establish and enforce protections against systemic abuse. This dynamic of invisibility and commodification of aquatic animals reflects broader patterns of exploitation within human systems as well. The objectification of aquatic animals, shaped by the human gaze, operates through dynamics of power and control. By failing to recognize autonomy and reducing individuals to bodies or resources, exploitation becomes easier to justify and to perpetuate, contributing to cultural and ecological harm. Today's panel brings these themes into focus by exploring the role of the human gaze, systems of power, and the impacts on aquatic species and indigenous communities. Aquatic animals are not separate from us. They're integral to the world that we share. By understanding their needs, struggles, experiences, and how they are seen, overlooked, and hidden within systems of exploitation, we cultivate a deeper sense of interconnectedness. This awareness compels us to challenge the human gaze and advocate for a future in which all beings are able to live free from exploitation. As you can see from this slide, we have an exceptional panel today. So without further ado, I would like to turn it back to Miranda to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for that wonderful introduction and for setting the stage for today's conversation. We'll now hear from our keynote speaker, Carol J. Adams, who will present on the sexual politics of sea creatures. Carol is the author of The Sexual Politics of Meat, a feminist vegan critical theory, now available in a newly updated 35th anniversary edition. Carol's other books include The Pornography of Meat, Neither Man Nor Beast, Feminism and the Defense of Animals, Burger, and with co-author Virginia Messina, Protest Kitchen, Fight Injustice, Save the Planet, and Fuel Your Resistance one meal at a time. She has a Master of Divinity from Yale University, taught seminary courses on pastoral care, and has spoken on more than 130 college and university campuses. Her articles have appeared in the New York Times, Washington Post, Ms. Magazine, Tikkun, and Truthdig, among others. She's an activist against sexual violence, racism, and homelessness, and for reproductive justice and fair housing. Carol, we're thrilled to have you with us. Thank you for joining today's World Aquatic Animal Day panel.
Thank you. Thank you to Miranda and Kathy for all their work organizing this event and for all the panelists that I'm honored to be with. I have a slideshow which I will find and share, and we'll get started. Sexual politics and sea animals. An introduction and provocation. Culture as we know it is patriarchy's self-image, said Suzanne Kapler back in the 1980s in a book called The Pornography of Representation. I read The Lay of the Land, a 1975 classic in feminist theory, while working on the sexual politics of meat. Annette Kolodny's project was looking at and appraising the gendered language of the New World. Lay of the land, in which lay was a double entendre. The metaphor of land as woman, this book was the first systematic documentation of the recurrent responses to the American continent as a feminine entity, as mother, as virgin, as temptress, as the ravished. It was also the first systematic inquiry into the metaphor's implication for the current ecological crisis. I do not believe a comparable book has been written on the waters of the world, but if it were, I think it would argue that we live in a world shaped by patriarchal attitudes about dominance, and it's gendered. Whether it is an anti-suffrage image from the early 20th century featuring a sea creature, or a more recent image for a restaurant selling dead shrimp, dominance is gendered. Colored pictures, race and visual representation, by Michael Harris provides a guide for understanding the patriarchal shaping of attitudes toward the sea and the sea's creatures. When discussing artworks featuring African and African American women, Harris noted three aspects of race and visual representation: patriarchal structures, the white male perspective as universal, and the appropriation of female bodies. Whenever I drive by my local res zoos, which has featured this vignette in its mural for 20 years, I am reminded of how appropriation of others' bodies is gendered. That's 20 years of reminders, because there it is: patriarchal structures, the white male perspective as universal, and the appropriation of female bodies. It's been called the arrogant eye, or the male gaze, which we should actually call the human male gaze. The fact is, patriarchal power enables the moral disregard of sea animals. At the minimum, I found 5 ways the gendering of sea animals reflects Harris's typology and does no favor to sea animals. Male visual dominance, how the myth of the desire to be desired is sexualized and feminized, that men look at women and women look at men looking at women, a famous insight of John Berger's, gendered language for defeated animals, and the fish in water problem. Male visual dominance. People have been sending me images of dominance and sea creatures and women for many, many years. They'll take pictures of t-shirts like this from Key West, Eat It Raw. To whom are they referring? Raw, fresh, and tasty. It's patriarchal propaganda for consumption of both women and sea animals because they want it. They desire to be desired. They want it. Steam me, beat me, eat me. Sea animals desire to be desired, desire to entertain you, desire to be consumed. This is from a menu, because this is what they want. How interesting that the only time that consumable non-humans are credited with the consciousness of desire is that they want to meet your desire, our desire, human desire. They want to please you. Why, they will serve you themselves. There was an activist who named this suicide food. We exist for you and only you. But often there's an additional twist. The desire to be desired is sexualized and feminized. Remember the shrimp? There she is, asking you to peel her and eat her. How about walking in New York City, Minneapolis, and seeing a better class of sushi? It's always interesting how many sea animals become bipedal in these images. The point is, they are available right now. The best tail in Portland. Or live nude lobsters. What other kinds are there? Look at the joke that they have about lefties, because Lefty has lost one of Lefty's claws. So girls, drop your fishnets for the restaurant Big Fish, Little Fish. More double entendres, because dressing is optional. Here's the cover of GQ in Italy, featuring a famous Italian chef, Carlo Cracco, fully clothed in Texan red bow tie, ignoring a nude, dark-haired white woman hugging him, dressed only in stiletto boots, clearly heeding the command to drop her fishnets. Her left leg is raised along his crotch and hip. As a phallic representation, she holds a dead fish in her left hand, centered on Cracco's middle, extending from above his stomach downward. In an article on why men are more often shown dressed in movies, but women are more frequently shown naked, a New York Times reporter quoted Lenore Rosenman, a psychologist. She said, "This is still a society that protects men. One way we do it is by not exposing them. There is something of a power trip in stripping women and keeping men covered and safe, like a live nude lobster." Here's Padmi Lakshmi. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. posing almost naked on top of live nude lobsters. The third point of the patriarchal politics of vision, as John Berger observed, is that men look at women and women look at men looking at women. As Catherine McKinnon has said, inequality is made sexy. Take this photo shoot for the New York Times style section. It's showing a fragmented woman, headless, a popular trope, at a supposed bachelor party, posing for male voyeurs. One man seems to be ejaculating with his champagne, and another is enhancing his privileged vision. She's standing on a table with her stiletto heels very close to a lobster. What would you say if you learned that this image appeared around the time a new kind of pornography emerged called crush videos or animal snuff movies? In these crush videos, women in stiletto heels, stiletto from dagger, are shown crushing small animals to death with their high heels. Crush videos often focus on a woman's leg from her knees down to her heels. And here's the New York Times participating in it in their oh so genteel way, because nothing beats a great set of legs. So get the legs that get all the compliments. Women are taught to be aware of how to look and then to conform to those expectations. They must look edible, like those legs of hers. But edible like who? Okay, so some of these can be explained because they were advertisements for restaurants that are committed to serving dead sea animals as consumable beings, like women who are consumable. But how to explain this? This again is from the New York Times. Fish and chicks. Get it? Instead of fish and chip. There, the New York Times says, if you're angling for a trophy in the Florida Keys where fish this big are pitched back into the deep, concentrate on your bikini. The skimpiest takes the prize. Again, learning to meet the human male gaze, or the arrogant eye. This too is from the New York Times style section, arm candy. It gives me the shivers to think about this circulating in popular culture at the same time that Jeffrey Epstein was selling children and women like candy to privileged men. It is one of the things we have learned from the partial release of the Epstein files, that men indeed do look at women as consumable, as arm candy. In 2019, an English judge sentenced a man who punched his girlfriend in the face and bent her fingers back. The judge told him that he was not going to send him to jail. He instructed the man to leave his former girlfriend alone since, quote, there were plenty more fish in the sea. The fourth point is language is gendered for defeated animals. So at the beginning, I showed you the book about the lay of the land, how the land is figured as female. But what about the sea? The sea is referred to as a feminine noun in some languages like French, la mer, and Spanish, la mar. Waves too have been gendered. The wave as woman, and women have claimed waves, the first wave, the second wave of feminism, third and fourth waves. In The Sexual Politics of Meat, I draw on the work of a French linguistic specialist to discuss why animals, whether they're perceived as male or female, might be referred to as female. What grammatical rules decide this? Andrew Joly explains it this way. Now, any animal, however small or big and irrespective of its sex, may be considered as a major power, he, or a minor power, she. He is used when, whatever its size, the animal is presented as an active power and a possible danger to the speaker. But she, on the other hand, signals a minor power. This explains why whales are called shes, and we hear from the crow's nest the call, there she blows. As Joly points out, sportsmen will often speak of a hare and a fish as she. He continues, in fact, she has acquired a very specific function in modern English. It is expressly used to refer to an animal regarded as a minor power. This accounts in particular for the, quote, professional use of she. Sportsmen, of course, that's a misnomer. Whales, fishermen are in special relation to the animal. Whatever the animal's size or strength, it is regarded as a potential prey, a power that has to be destroyed for sport or food, hence a dominated power. She represents not only a minor power, but a vanquished power, a soon-to-be-killed powerless animal. So there she blows. The final issue is the fish in water problem. Marshall McLuhan famously said if you asked a fish to describe their life, the last thing they would mention is water. Catherine McKinnon observes that all women live in sexual objectification the way fish live in water. They are seen as live bait, happy hookers, speaking simultaneously to men about women and to fishermen, so-called, about catching fish. More than a fifth of men between 18 and 35 were holding a dead fish in their Tinder profile picture, according to a research study. This was seen in Great Britain. Size doesn't matter unless you're a fisherman. There is so much braggadocio in this genre because they are chasing tail. They know how to use their rods. So much insecurity. I feel it's like the way Trump surrounds him with mincing men who won't challenge him but fire all the women. They know how to use their rods. Suzanne Kapler says, the human male gender's project of constituting human male subjectivity is a serious business that has nothing to do with fictional and playful fantasy. It is the means by which the human male subject convinces himself that he is real. He feels the more real, the less real the other, the less of a subject the other, the less alive the other. And the reality he creates for himself through his cultural self-representation is the authorized version of reality, the dominant reality for all of us. This is why it is difficult to get people who enjoy dominance to give up their entitlement. They have to reconceive selfhood to disown entitlement and reconceive the arrogant I to affirm connection and intersubjectivity. But this is how they see the world, how they see the sea and the sea's creatures. Because inequality wasn't just made sexy, it was made tasty. One's ability to care about another's experience of exploitation is influenced by the pleasure gained from that exploitation. To reconceive selfhood and disown entitlement in the arrogant I requires stepping away from the patriarchal world-forming viewpoint that awards them dominance. There's a famous anecdote about Franz Kafka, the author of Metamorphosis, and this shows the challenge. After becoming vegetarian, he went to an aquarium and supposedly said to the fishes, "Now I can look at you as I no longer eat you." But he's talking to captive sea animals in an institution of human oppression, the aquarium. What kind of look can he give them? Dominance does not like to interrogate itself. The stronger patriarchal structures become, the greater the threat to all life in the sea. This is what is happening right now as women in the United States work for their own oppression. To see sea animals as individuals, as subjects of their own lives, patriarchal vision has to be converted, and inequality has to be seen not as tasty, but as something to reject. We are to see sea creatures, the appetite for enjoyment and consumption has to be retrained. We are asking privilege to give up its privilege, the privilege to consume others. To paraphrase David Foster Wallace from Consider the Lobster, to recognize that our enjoyment of lunch is not more important than another's life. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, for that thought-provoking and powerful presentation. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you so much. And just a quick reminder to everyone, if questions are coming up for you, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A chat. We're looking forward to discussing them shortly. Next, we'll hear from Juliette Jackson. Juliette is an indigenous rights lawyer with specialties in energy and environmental law and an enrolled member of the Klamath tribes. She works at Henkel's Law, LLC in Portland, Oregon, and serves as executive director of a native-led Oregon-based nonprofit. Juliette is passionate about tribal environmental justice and is part of the Protecting Mother Earth Collective, which is a joint partnership between the Indigenous Environmental Network and the Earth Law Center. Her work focuses on rights of nature initiatives and implementing inherent relationship jurisprudence with tribal communities along the West Coast. Juliette has presented her research at various private, public, and academic forums and authored the law review article, Stop Killing the Klamath: Rights of Nature Protections with Tribal Law, the National Historic Preservation Act, and Collaborative Management Strategies for a Tribe on the Front Lines of Climate Change, which has attracted substantial attention in the field of tribal environmental justice. And her team is taking action to implement the legal solutions proposed in her publication by leading a Rights of Nature community cultural preservation project. We're honored to have you, Juliette. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to learn more.
Dishwatis nanukans kayo sa Juliette Jackson, Dwakanian, Modaki Shushkakini, Nua, Modaki Shus Muklux, Waglisat. I said, good day, everyone. My name is Juliette Jackson. I am Modoc, and in our language, we call ourselves Muklux. That the greeting was in the Klamath Modoc language. Thank you for that introduction, Miranda. I have some slides available to go with my presentation, so just give me a moment to screen share. Right. So, the title of this presentation is Stop Killing the Klamath. Our sacred fish relatives are on the brink of extinction. So I'm just a little overview of how their little mini presentation will go. We're going to do a little introduction on my background, introduction about the Klamath tribes, talk about the pollution, advocacy ahead, and like a rights of nature solution to propose to fix the challenges that are happening. So as mentioned, I work at Henkel's Law based in Portland, Oregon. We actually serve as we have a contract with the judiciary branch of the Klamath tribes as the defense attorneys. I currently now in my capacity volunteer as executive director of Muklukskakini, which translates to people of this land. That's a nonprofit that my cousin started, and now I've taken it over, and we're transitioning into a different direction and really moving forward with trying to get involved with dam removal and more advocacy work than before. It was more heavily focused on stewarding. So we're moving in different directions. And as mentioned, I am part of the Protecting Mother Earth Collective, which is a partnership between Earth Law Center and Indigenous Environmental Network. We're in talks, we're in the process of bringing on tribal clients on the West Coast. We're doing some rights of nature projects, which is really exciting. And I'm really happy and glad to be part of it. Just a little brief introduction about who I am. So I am my dad is indigenous. My mom is Latina and mixed race. So she's also a little bit indigenous. She's Pueblo, but mostly identifies as Latina because she grew up with Mexican American background. These are just some photos of my family so you get a familiarity with who I am, where I come from. Since I will be talking about my tribe, it always feels a little more natural to start by talking about my family and where I come from. So in the middle there is my great-grandfather, Boyd Jackson Sr., who is actually a quite prominent person in our history. He was our delegate during the termination hearings when our tribe was our federal recognition was terminated and our treaty was broken. And so he traveled to Congress advocating for our community and trying to, preserve our treaty rights, which were really instrumental in getting our recognition back in 1986. So I come from a great legacy of leaders that I'm really proud of. And then you see my dad on the left with all my sisters. He tried 6 times to have boys, and he has 2 grandsons now. But yeah, lots of ladies in my family, although I have lots of male cousins. And then there's some other photos of family, including my great grandma. So I'm enrolled with Klamath, but I'm Klamath, Modoc, Hoopa, Pit River, and Wintu and Mono. My great grandma, she's Wintu and Hoopa, and then my grandma is Mono, the Cold Springs Rancheria, which is in the Fresno area of California. So I always tell people I'm native Californian because on both sides, Klamath Tribes is transboundary. We're in Oregon and California. So it's a little bit about my family and my background. So I want to start with showing you all our creation story and our youth paddlers who participated down the descent of the Klamath River. They put together this really cute and short little clip. Because normally I would just read our creation story about our Chwam and Koptu, which are our sacred fish that we are tied to. And they put this little video together, and I'm going to play it for you. And if you can't, oh, sorry, that was their little, afterwards you can see their faces. So that's our creation story about our Chwam and Koptu. And this is a picture about the Chwam. You can see there's actually a juvenile. They are a very, very long living fish. And I said in that video, that's part of our creation story. And if these fish die, we die too. And that's how tied to these fish we are spiritually. And so I want to tell you a little bit, that's our little background of our creation. And I want to tell you a little bit about where we're located. So like I mentioned, we are a transboundary tribe. We're in Oregon and in California. And you can see this map here. All the green area is the ceded lands. And we have a treaty with the United States, the Treaty of 1864. And so all that land we ceded to the US government. And then you'll see in red is the reservation that we were put onto. So the reservation lands consist of the Klamath, Modoc, and Yahuskin Paiute. Those are three tribes, and there's 27 bands within those three tribes. So we're quite diverse. And so, traditionally we spoke Klamath and Modoc, and then also the Paiute speak Paiute. And so Klamath and Modoc are more similar culturally and we're geographically a little closer located together, which is how we ended up on the same reservation. And so many of us are mixed Klamath, Modoc, or Paiute, and then of course with other tribes as well. But my particular band I come from is the Hot Creek Band of Modoc. And so we are actually, our traditional homelands are on the California side. And so way up north in California. And you can see this map here on the right. This shows, where our reservation was, we were pushed up into Oregon, into the Chiloquin area. And you can see the water and all the different rivers and Crater Lake up here in the corner. And so a lot of people know of our homelands because they think of Crater Lake, which we call Giwas. And my dad at Giwas. It's like a few years ago. And then, in our Modoc lands, there's the Lava Beds National Monument. And these are these huge labyrinths of these tunnels that were created from, the volcano in the region. And it's really incredible when you go to these tunnels and they go deep into the cave. And I know it's an area that people like to go and recreate for. So most people who know of us, they might know they've been to Crater Lake. If they don't know the Klamath tribes, they at least know of the Crater Lake. But as you know, most people probably know of at least our name because of the Klamath River. And despite what you've seen in many major headlines all over the world, the Klamath River is not free. It's not free flowing. That is false. It's been sensationalized for people to make, to make money. It's a better headline, I guess, but it's not the truth. There's actually 6 dams on the Klamath River, and 4 of those dams came out, but 2 of them still remain and all of these dams, and they are located in our ancestral homelands. And you can see, I brought that same map up where you can see our ceded territory. All 6 of those dams are in our area, And we are the only tribe on this river. And you can see here's a little map that shows a little difference. So off the Klamath River, you see the Upper Klamath Lake. There's all these different rivers that feed into it. There's the dams that came down, Iron Gate, Kafka 1 and 2, and J.C. Boyle. The other two dams are called Keynote and Link. I don't have them blown up on this here, but they're a little further up closer to where we're at. But they're all within our ancestral homelands. And we were the only tribe that was cut off from salmon, which we call Chials. And Chials haven't been in our territory since 1909. That's how long we've been without them. And, it's part of our culture to eat fish. And it's been because of being a tribe that's been cut off from salmon and because of what's been going on in our watershed, we really haven't had subsistence of fish in our diet for a really, really long time. And just to give you a little context of like what's so special about where we're from is historically this watershed was huge. It is a massive watershed. It's the largest fresh body of water west of the Rockies in the United States. There's no other large fresh body of water like it on the west. And historically, it was huge. And this whole watershed used to be connected. All of these different lakes and rivers and streams and marshes, all of it was a connected system together. And so our Trom and Kaptu, they would migrate. They had different migratory patterns, and they're disconnected from those spawning grounds. They're disconnected because there's still dams that remain. And this also affects our Chials, our salmon, that are now back in our watershed. And it's been since the early 1900s since they've been there. They miraculously made it past these two dams. But they too cannot access their historic spawning grounds in all areas because besides those two dams, there's also, this is an irrigation map. It's a little harder to see. There's more than just two dams in our watershed. There's two dams left on the Klamath River that prevent them from going up entirely to their historic spawning grounds and making their way back because those two dams were not designed for salmon fish passage, especially Chinook passage. But there's more dams because there's several canals that come off of this watershed, and this whole area has just been drained and disconnected. And it's terrible because this area is referred to as the Everglades of the West. It's rich in biodiversity. It's a huge area where birds migrate. And there's actually been, people know of the fish kill on the Klamath River that happened in the early 2000s. They don't know about the bird kill that happens and is ongoing. It's so bad what's happened to our environment. And it's devastating because, our Trom and our Kaptu and our Chials, these are all endangered species. Our Trom and Kaptu have been listed as endangered since the late 1980s. And, now the Chials, our salmon are back in our watershed, and we're really worried that they're going to suffer the same fate that's happening with our fish. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that contamination in just a moment. I just wanted to show you a little bit. This lake is massive. This is just a view from Modoc Point here. It doesn't really do it justice because it's such a big lake. I can't even capture it in a photo wherever I go. Here's a little aerial view of one of the rivers. And here's a little bit, you can see the Klamath River and the kids during the paddling. That was last summer that they had that journey down the river. And then the dams started coming out in late 2023, and all through 2024 was when the 4 dams were coming down. But those kids, when they started their adventure, they started on this river, the Wood River. And you can see that river is beautiful. It has it's turquoise, clear water. It is just amazing. And then those kids they went across this big lake, the Upper Klamath Lake, which actually used to look like this. What we've been told by our ancestors, it was a clear bottom lake. It's not that deep of a lake. And it used to have beautiful water like this. And now the water is darker. And you can see actually in the middle there, that's where the paddlers are at. They look like little ants. That's how big this lake is. Because there's been pollution. And this is what this lake looks like, especially during summertime. And you can see there's toxic algae blooms. We can't even recreate on this lake. Most of the time, it is closed for recreation. Dogs die drinking the water. The severity of this, like I tell people, we have a dark water situation. And many people don't know about it. And those kids kayaked across that toxic lake, which personally, if I had children, I would not consent to them doing that because it's extremely dangerous. I mean, you can't drink the water from it, let alone can you imagine like if you fell inside of the lake? I mean, we had one of our paddlers just presented at the Pioneers Conference as one of the youth keynote speakers, sharing her personal story about what happened to her when she fell into the water and got very sick. Luckily, not during that descent when she participated in it, but another year. She got extremely sick from just being in the water. This is the severity of the problem in our homelands, and it's sad, and it's a huge problem. And it's like, how did this happen? The dams, which went in the early 1900s, PFAS chemicals that have come from, there's been wildfires and droughts and pesticides from agriculture and farming, and the cows. The cows are getting into the upper watershed area. Those beautiful rivers that we have that feed into the upper Klamath Lake, cows, the lack of enforcement has been an issue. And then cows, they're not from here. Cows are not from the United States. They're not from this region. We didn't grow them. We didn't have them here. We actually had bison in our region. And a lot of people don't know that, but we had some bison in that area and not cows. And they're polluting, and their fecal matter is getting into in the watershed, and there's a lack of enforcement. And so although those 4 dams came down, there's a huge problem still. Toxic water is still seeping down that river. And what I've heard recently talking to some folks downriver is they think there might be another fish kill around the corner. It's that bad, especially because we had a very bad winter. We didn't get enough water. The levels in the river are very low. It's not good, despite what you're seeing in the news of people perpetuating this idea that it's free and it's healthy and it's clean. It's not true. It is not true. It is cleaner. But these are chemicals that are going down that we know are there, right? There's so much work to be done to expose the toxins that are in that water and how much I mean, in my opinion, like I said, I don't think those kids should have descended down that river. It's not safe. It's not safe at all. If you want to ask me about it, I'll tell you my opinion about what I think happened there. But it's amazing they did that journey. It's incredible. They're strong and brave, but it was not safe at all. And to give you a little context of what's been happening in our area. I mean, all this pollution, all this stuff that's happened from colonization. And the Native American Rights Fund, which is one of the most prominent nonprofits that work on federal Indian law and tribal law matters, they've said that, no other tribe in America has been victimized by the vagaries of federal Indian law policies than the Klamath tribes. This is how bad it's been, and it's impacting our sacred fish, our Chwam and our Kaptu. Even though they've been listed as endangered, they're still on the brink of extinction because of this toxic water. And we worry our Chials are going to have the same fate. But we're doing what we can to try to fix the problem. And part of what's happened is we've been unable to use fire on our landscape since being colonized, right? Treaty of 1864, we were not been able to use fire until more recently. And these are examples from the Boot Lake fire in 2021. This is a devastating fire that was massive. And we had already, we've had a co-stewarding agreement with the Forest Service since 1998, and then it was amended in 2005. And this agreement allows us to do prescribed burning and thinning. And you can see here in the photos, those areas where we touched with our burning, I ran around, right? The proof is in the photos. We can see how effective it is to have fire back on the landscape. But I did want to note, it's not just for fuel reduction and doing it for this. Fire is important for bringing back, to cleaning the water, for restoring the ecosystem. Like after we had these fires, meadows were coming back. New seedlings were coming to life. And the sad part is, and the infuriating part is, those cows. Those cows got back on the land and they're destroying up those meadows. They're getting back in the water, and all this work we do with fire and prescribed burning to try to clean it up, it's destroying everything. And so it's just heartbreaking. And I don't know, I wanted to check, how am I on time? Because I had this short little 2-minute video about the salmon back in our watershed, and I just want to make sure I'm not over on my time right now.
Yes, Juliette, go for it. Please share.
Okay, great. So this is a video made by one of our fellow tribal members who's documenting a lot of the descent for the children when they went down the Klamath River. And this video just shows that You know, the cheetahs are back in our watershed, which is exciting, right? Hasn't happened since 1909. And I just want to show a little bit about this. This has some of the paddlers in the videos.
People expected the salmon to take longer to get up to their spawning grounds, but they definitely proved people wrong. Salmon haven't been in these places in over 100 years, so for them to be here is really amazing, and it shows, you know, just never give up.
I don't know, I was just excited to see them. I think I was just really ready just to come up here, see them in general. It means a lot to me. I have hope for our future generation.
I always like, I cry every time I watch that video. So salmon are back, but we still have these two dams. You can see on the left is the Link Dam that's located in Klamath Falls, which is really close to Chilcothe, where the reservation base or our headquarters are at for our tribal health building and our administration offices. It looks like a really tiny dam when you see it, but it's much larger in person. This is like a view that I took from the top of the hill. And prior to that, there's actually all these canal diversions. So there's a canal diversion that's just ahead of that, that goes off to the left. And then there's two canal versions that are on the side. And then this is the dam, the Keynote Dam on the right. That's a little located like right on the border area between Northern California and Oregon. And this one's a little larger, and this one's in a little more rural spot. It's not closer to the town, so it's a bit of a trek out there to get there. But yeah, these two dams are still there, and I don't know how the salmon made it over. The camera footage is blurry, but I don't know how they're going to make it back. That's the concern, is how are these salmon when they spawn, how are they going to make it back? And we've already had some newly hatched, Chinook shells. This is a little baby one that we have here. But already, this is a photo from November. We've already found some salmon that didn't successfully spawn and they died. And so this is one that still has eggs inside of it. But no, I mean, you can only suspect it's related to the toxic water. Why they died, I don't know. This is a photo a fellow tribal member sent me. They found them at this location, Rocky Point, Klamath Falls, in the Upper Klamath Lake. So what we try to do is think about solutions, right? How did we got here? this toxic water happened. We thought listing our fish as endangered underneath the Endangered Species Act was going to do something, right? It's the strongest environmental statute, it's the strongest tool we have in the United States, but it doesn't work. And so when I was at GW doing my master's in energy and environmental law, I had, that's when I worked on my publication and identified a right to nature tool. And I did this after our film came out in 2021, raising awareness about the issues affecting our sacred trauma and Kapti fish, and of course also the chiels now that they're back. This film was made before the chiels had returned to our waters. And so I identified a rights of nature tool within the federal Indian law framework within the Natural Historic Preservation Act. And so you can use that to get a traditional cultural property designation. And when you get that listed and designated in that area, it can stop development and projects and hopefully more pollution from happening. And so, unlike the Endangered Species Act and many environmental statutes in the United States that were not designed for tribes, this statute actually was. It was amended in the 1990s after advocacy that came after the Ling case, which was a religious freedom case related to a sacred site being destroyed. And this case went to the Supreme Court. And, what came out of it afterwards was these amendments to the NHPA and being able to designate sacred sites. And just to tell you how powerful the statute can be is Lummi Nation got a TCP designation and it blocked the building of the largest coal terminal in North America. So it's quite powerful once you get it in place. And so our goal at Mukluk-Skakini is, to do a TCP, but not just a TCP for particular areas, for our entire watershed, because traditionally we cremate our loved ones. It's very unique. Not many tribes do that. Klamath and Modoc cremate our loved ones and we put them into the water. It's something we haven't been able to practice for a very long time, but our ancestors are still in those waters. They're still trapped by those dams. They haven't been able to flow back into the ocean. And, our team at Mukluk-Skakini is putting, we're started and we're still in the pilot phase of doing community mapping. So we're mapping our watershed, identifying sacred places, identifying sacred sites, and also identifying pollution spots. And so this is a community mapping. Anyone can do it using this application that we have. But we're also, this summer, we plan to start doing promoting the transmission of knowledge between elders and youth by capturing that knowledge and putting it into legal declarations, doing community workshops, and also PR related to what's been going on in our watershed. So we want to restore our watershed so it can be back to what it used to be and reconnect the system so our spawning grounds come back for our trauma and Kaptu. So our chiels can access all of their historic spawning grounds, because we've already seen what's happening with our chiels being back. Some of them aren't making it, but the ones that are back are already starting to clean the beds for the trauma and the Kaptu and the trout. It's pretty incredible when you get, that aquatic species back into this area that hasn't been there so long. They're already doing what they're meant to do and bringing these nutrients back to the water, right? Because you're bringing that back from the ocean. But this issue is dire and imminent. We have to act fast. We don't have a lot of time. We might have only a couple years left before our trauma and Kaptu are completely gone. And who knows with our chiels, they've already, it's an emergency. And so thank you all for your time. Mosa Kwecha. If you have any questions, please let me know. I apologize if I went over with my time. I tried my best to stay within.
No apologies needed. Juliette, that was informative and deeply impactful. We're so grateful for your presentation. Thank you so much. And also for all of the vital work that you're leading to protecting communities and our shared environment. We're so grateful. Okay, we'll now hear from our final panelist, Cormac Cullinan, who will expand on rights-based approaches to aquatic animals and their habitats. Cormac is an environmental attorney, author, advocate, and global leader in the rights of nature movement. He's advised governments and helped draft environmental laws and policies in more than 30 countries, including on marine fisheries, aquaculture, and coastal management. He is managing director of the leading South Africa environmental law firm, Cullinan and Associates Incorporated, and executive director of the Wild Law Institute. His groundbreaking book, Wild Law, A Manifesto for Earth Justice, helped inspire the global rights of nature movement. Cormac also played a leading role in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth, is a founder and executive committee member of the Global Alliance for Rights of Nature, a judge of the International Rights of Nature Tribunal, and Cormac plays a leading role in the Antarctica Rights and Table Mountain Rights initiatives. He's received multiple awards for his efforts, including the Nick Steele Award for the South African Environmentalist of the Year and the Shackleton Medal for the protection of the polar regions. Thank you, Cormac, for joining us. We're so excited for your presentation.
Thank you very much for that very fulsome introduction. I'm just going to share my screen. I thought that I would just talk very briefly about, give a few examples from my experience, which seem to me relevant to the topic, transforming how we see aquatic animals. So let me just start with, I think for me, the fundamental challenge at the heart of this is encountering aquatic animals who are very different to us. So the key question for me is, who are you? And this is both us looking at aquatic animals and also wondering perhaps about how they may experience us. Now, just before I get into the presentation, I thought I would just touch very, very briefly on, as it were, the philosophical background or philosophical underpinnings of how I've approached this. So I was very influenced by the work of Thomas Berry, and as you'll see in this quote here, he's saying that the interdependence of every mode of being on every other mode of being requires humans to recognize that every living being has rights that are derived from existence itself. Otherwise, the ordered structure and functioning of the entire planet are endangered. I think that there is a huge overlap with the animal rights based on sentience, etc. But I suppose essentially where I'm coming from is that we have these inherent rights by virtue of our interconnection with the whole. As Miranda mentioned, I was involved with the drafting of the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth, and I guess in a sense this is the key point of the declaration, is that if we say that we human beings have human rights because we exist as humans, even if our governments deny them to us, then all other beings must surely also have similar rights to exist and play their ecological functions. Now, the first case I thought I'd speak about was some litigation that we did against Shell. It was one of the most, it's probably the case that produced the biggest outcry among the public in South Africa. So this was a case where Shell Oil Company wanted to conduct seismic surveys and seismic testing off an area of South Africa known as the Wild Coast. So it's a beautiful, pristine area of the coast. And as many of you will know, these seismic tests involve dragging an array of effectively guns behind a vessel, and these explode at regular intervals, consistently night and day. And they record the shock waves that penetrate not only the water, but also the seabed, and that enables them to map whether or not there is oil and gas. So this is hugely, this is incredibly loud, effectively. But one of the things I think which was very educational for me was when I began to read the expert affidavits that we were filing in this case about the impact of marine life. And as the title of this seminar says, we talk about the gaze, how we see other species, but we don't realize, or I hadn't realized, that in fact incorporated that within that is the bias of a terrestrial mammal, because we are mammals that are very reliant on sight, and so we tend to our metaphors are about sight and seeing, etc. But what this evidence was showing was that because most of the ocean is dark, the light doesn't penetrate very far, and water is much denser than air, which means that sound travels very, very far, is that marine creatures, by and large, have been evolved for an entirely different environment, and they are extremely sensitive to sound. So when we were using analogies in the expert evidence, like the sound from the seismic surveys is like the sounds of a jet engine or something like that, we are still actually underplaying it, because that's what it would be like for a human. But for a being which would experience sound along its entire body, it's going to feel this noise in an entirely different way. It also meant that the experts described, for example, how cetaceans and others use sound not only to communicate, to keep in touch with their calves, because they come to South Africa, the whales come to South African waters to breed, and then they travel through this area with young calves. And there's all kinds of, it also has essentially kills plankton which in the vicinity, but it has an incredible number of really unknown effects. So one of the things that we faced in this litigation was, first of all, to communicate the intensity of the impact on other than human beings, marine creatures. But also we were faced from an evidentiary point of view with the argument that where the other side said, Shell's lawyer said, but where's the evidence that this is harmful? Seismic surveys happen all over the world. They've been happening for decades, and you don't see any reports of lots of dead whales washing up on the beaches, etc. And our experts had to point out that the absence of evidence did not mean the absence of impact, because for a start, it's very expensive and difficult to do research about the impact of human activities on the ocean environment. Many of these activities are literally beyond the horizon. You can't see them from the land. And of course, they're invisible. They're underwater. They're invisible to humans. And many of the impacts are sublethal. So they might not be causing whales to die and wash up on the beaches, but they're interfering with their ability to communicate with the young, to navigate. They're interfering with ability of penguins to feed, and many, many other impacts that we don't know. And the other difficulty is that we are used to, in litigation, to saying, well, this was the baseline, and then you did this activity, and it made the following impact, which is measured from the baseline. But in most of these marine environments, there is no baseline. There is no research that has been done to show what the normal state is, what normally happens in the absence of human interactions. So one struggles from a practical point of view, not only with seeing things from a very different perspective and communicating how different the ocean environment is, but also with the depth of the unknown, that there's a huge absence of knowledge. And in this particular case, there was another dimension, because the traditional Mampondo communities who live along that wide coast and who have been fishing from and collecting food from the environment for centuries, in their belief system, the oceans are the home of the ancestors. They are the homes where their ancestors return to, and they're also the home of specific spiritual beings. So when they heard this testing was going to happen, they were very, very disturbed, because they hadn't been consulted beforehand. And from their perspective, it was going to disturb their ancestors and the various spiritual beings in the ocean. And that would result in dire consequences for the human communities. So one of the key issues in the case was the absence of consultation, the lack of consultation with these communities. As one of the advocates said during the hearing, these communities are the only people who can explain to the court and to decision makers their concerns about the potential implications on beings which are not recognized normally by the mainstream legal system. And for that reason, it's absolutely essential that they are consulted. So it was just interesting to think of not only what we might call ecological organic beings, but also spiritual beings. Now, we've also been involved in a lot of other litigation against offshore oil and gas, and both in the Shell case and in these other cases against companies like Total. One of the things that we've been able to use to our advantage is a provision in the Integrated Coastal Management Act of South Africa. And the Integrated Coastal Management Act defines coastal waters, well, the beach and the coastal waters out to the furthest extent of the exclusive economic zone as coastal public property, which is owned not by the state but by the people. And it says that management decisions in relation to coastal public property must be made not in the national interest but in the interests of the whole community. And this is, as you'll see on the screen there, this is how interests of the whole community is defined in that legislation. So it talks about a long-term perspective. I've abbreviated it slightly here, but the most important point is subsection C. You must take into account the interests of other living organisms that are dependent on the coastal environment. So this is probably, I think it's probably the only expression in South African law where one is expressly required to take into account the interests of other living organisms. And of course, when you think about it, it makes complete sense that if you're going to make decisions about a particular area or aspect of the environment, that one should look at the collective interests, not just of people who are dependent on the environment, but also of the other living beings. Now, nobody really knows how to take account of the interests of other living organisms. But I think certainly if we were able to ask the whales to vote on the issue about whether they'd like offshore oil and gas exploration happening, they would vote against it. And certainly it's very hard to see how any degradation of the marine environment could be in the interests of other living marine organisms. So this particular clause does give us an opening, which I hope we will expand in future litigation, and to at least require decision making. Well, first of all, require an evaluation of what the impacts might be on other living organisms, and then also bringing that into decision making. I'm now just going to end off by talking about the rights of Antarctica. So this is another project that we've initiated. And Antarctica is unique, not just ecologically, and it is ecologically unique. It's this huge land. The continent itself is bigger than the USA and Mexico combined, and it's surrounded by a circumpolar current, which is the outer boundary of the Southern Ocean. And it's a very rich ecosystem, and together the continent and the Southern Ocean cover almost 10% of the surface of the planet. It varies slightly with the season. So, but it's also unique in governance terms because it's not owned by any state. There are various states who've got claims on it, but there's, under the Antarctic Treaty System, it's reserved for peace and science, peaceful purposes and science, and there's a kind of a club of nations that deal with it. Unfortunately, the Antarctic Treaty System, which was a great achievement when it was signed during the period of the Cold War, and prevented the mining of Antarctica at that time and possible conflicts, is now not really able to protect Antarctica because the key threat to Antarctica is climate change, which arises outside the treaty area, and decisions of the decisions under the Antarctic Treaty System must be made by consensus, and there are a number of countries who are really acting in bad faith and blocking any new declarations of marine protected areas, etc. So this initiative seeks to transform how people see Antarctica from this faraway place, which has historically provided a kind of backdrop for the age of heroic polar exploration, where it was yes, really something to be conquered by people, to transform the understanding that it's not just a place that is far away, it's this unique living community that is vitally important to all of us. Sorry, because it holds about 70% of the fresh water that is on the surface of the planet. And if it would take a long time for the ice sheets in Antarctica to melt, but if they do, we get sea level rise of more than 60 meters. So most of the major cities of the world anywhere near the coast would disappear, and the planet would be entirely different. So in other words, what happens in Antarctica in the form of melting ice does not stay in Antarctica. And because a lot of the ice is on land, it has a much bigger impact. When the Arctic melts, that ice is floating. So it's like when the ice in your glass, if you're drinking a glass of liquid with water, with ice in it, when that ice melts, your glass doesn't overflow. But if you take ice from land, from outside the glass and drop it in, it does overflow. So at the heart of this is the idea that Antarctica is unheard, not just unseen, but Antarctica as a whole, but also all the beings that form part of that community of life do not have a voice which is heard within human decision making. So because there are no indigenous people in Antarctica, it has no government. And because it's not recognized as a state, which means it's not represented, for example, in the climate change negotiations or the Convention on Biological Diversity or any of the other human decision-making fora which makes decisions which affect Antarctica. So a key objective is to bring the voice of Antarctica in the sense of best interests of Antarctica into human decision-making. And very briefly, this is some of the key steps on the journey. In October last year, IUCN passed a resolution on recognition of the rights of Antarctica. On the 1st of December last year, which was Antarctica Day, we launched an Antarctic Alliance of many organizations around the world who are uniting behind this initiative to have Antarctica recognized as the equivalent of a state of international law, with rights not just for Antarctica, but also for its beings. For example, the whales and the seabirds who would be seen as citizens of Antarctica and would we argue should retain those rights even when they are outside of Antarctica. And then we're in the process now of working on finalizing the Antarctica Declaration, which will be adopted on Antarctica Day here in Cape Town on the 1st of December. And we will then start working on measures to implement it. And key to that, for example, is finding out how best to listen to Antarctica. In other words, determine what's best for Antarctica, and to have structures, perhaps in the form of some kind of parliament or something like that, which can legitimately take those insights, as imperfect as they may be, into human decision making, with a view to really being able to represent Antarctica as a being or a community of beings within international decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Cormac, for that fascinating and insightful presentation and for all of your work. We're incredibly grateful. We've heard such rich and thoughtful and thought-provoking perspectives from all three speakers today, and I'm sure many of you have questions. So we'll now move into our Q&A session. And as a reminder, please submit your questions through the Q&A chat feature, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible in the next 15-ish minutes. So let's get started. Okay, it looks like we have an initial question for Juliette. Giovanna is very sad, as am I, to hear about the toxic waters, fire, etc. that you had described in your presentation, and very interesting to learn about the story of creation and your tribe's relationship to sacred fish. They would like to know your thoughts on the COP30 episode in Brazil, where an Amazonian chef refused to serve a vegan dinner for Prince William's Earthshot Prize. As for him, excluding pirarucu, the region's iconic fish, was kind of a lack of respect for traditions. And yeah, they thought that this was a thought-provoking incident, and we're curious if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, interesting question. I was looking at that earlier. I mean, I'm not vegan or vegetarian, and I do respect people's choices and what they want to do, but I do think personally, like having traveled to other communities and other indigenous communities, I definitely try to be respectful of like their traditions and culture. And so if they're eating something that's, they want to share with you and it's important, then I personally have always partaked in it. And I know it's hard if you're someone who that's not part of your diet and you don't do that. But my personal view on that, it's just my own, not to bash on anyone who's vegetarian or vegan, because I know you can get sick sometimes eating something that's not part of your diet on a regular basis. But I think with that context, it would be seen as disrespectful not to engage and to eat something. And so, yeah, having been in a similar scenario, I'll eat it. Like, for example, when I was down in Ecuador, they eat guinea pigs, and I've never had a guinea pig. But of course, I was actually excited to try it and participated in seeing the whole process of how it was prepared. And so I did eat. I mean, it wasn't my favorite thing, but I still ate it and ate all of it to be respectful. So I think that's just how I was raised. And in my culture, I'd say it would be similar if we're offering you something and to eat it to be respectful and eat it would be what I would encourage people to do, but I know there could be health consequences related to that. Um, that's just my view. Interesting question. That's yeah, again, just my perspective.
Thank you, Juliette. Next question is for Cormac. We have someone who is interested to hear more about the shell case you mentioned and how it ends. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more on that.
Yeah, sure. So we won in the first court, which was a full bench of the Eastern Cape High Court. And then they appealed it to the Supreme Court of Appeal. And we won again, except for on one aspect, the Supreme Court of Appeal made a very weird finding that although they agreed that the original exploration right was unlawfully granted, they allowed them to proceed with a renewal application, provided there was proper public participation on the renewal application. But it doesn't make any sense to allow the renewal of something that you've already found to be unlawful. And so we appealed just that point to the Constitutional Court, and we argued the case last year, but we haven't yet had the decision of the Constitutional Court on that. So touch wood, so far we've won all the way, and I would fully expect us to win on that point, just from basic legal principles. But we certainly, I don't want to count my chickens until they hatch. So, but there's also quite a nice film called Wild Coast Warriors about that about the communities involved and the case, if anybody's interested.
Thank you, Cormac. And yeah, well, we'd love to hear updates as you continue to learn more about how everything plays out. Okay, let's see. Next question is for Carol. Yeah, so Carol, we're curious, given the presentations we've had so far and the amazing presentation you gave today, how do you suggest changing the patriarchal and kind of human gaze when we talk about aquatic animals?
Well, I think we start in our own lives and we start educating people. I think I've noticed that just pointing out how all of these images are the wallpaper of our lives and getting people to notice how these presumptions are treated as laughable and then just jokes. People always say, well, you don't have a sense of humor. And I say, well, I don't have your sense of humor. Because I think the difficulty of having people recognize that what they're treating as an object is actually a subject is an effort in consciousness raising. And consciousness raising takes many forms. One form, and I'm not saying that this is universal, but is vegan foods that show people they're not going to miss what they think they need. There's a quote I use in Sexual Politics of Meat from Cato. It's hard, O citizens, to speak to a stomach that has no ears. So how do we do that? But we do that with wonderful meals. I ran into a friend who runs a vegan bake shop here in Dallas, and she had just discovered a new brand of vegan shrimp, which I hadn't had in years. I've been vegetarian for more than 50 years. But I got it, and it was sort of fun to see that you can even throw people off with these wonderful vegan products. So I say cooking for other people, educating people, calling attention always to ads or other forms that instrumentalize, sexualize, or objectify sea animals. Consciousness raising can happen in blogs, in comments on social media when something's posted. It's we know that water eventually causes a rock to wear away, and we need to be the water.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you. Thank you. We have another question for Cormac. What hope is there against the 48 applications for mining along the West Coast made in 2026?
Yeah, look, it's a good question because we're kind of getting overwhelmed by the volume. I think that there's a sort of mad rush to start as many oil and gas projects in Africa as possible because they can see that the window of opportunity is closing, and sooner or later it's going to become unlawful to start new fossil fuel things. So they're trying to explore and get the rights to exploit these areas, and then hopefully put in infrastructure. So we have, I think, look, it's obviously a resources thing. Litigation is expensive, and we don't have many clients who've got the money to litigate. But having said that, we are making progress because we've set some good precedents in our early cases. We're now able to use them in the later cases. And so in a sense, it's tipping in our favor. And then also, if you look at the advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice, the American Court, and there's one application now before the African Court, they're putting down quite stringent obligations for states. So the law is shifting in our favor. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to take on each of those cases. And so some will possibly get, particularly the terrestrial ones as well. I'm not sure I think the 48 it probably includes the terrestrial ones as well. So we have been successful in stopping a lot of them, but it takes a lot of time and effort. And we've tried to get declaratory orders. In other words, say, if you rule this one's unlawful, we also want you to make we also want the court to give directions about how future decisions like this should be made. But up to now, the courts have refused to go that far. So yeah, I guess the way I see it is that this is a very long-term thing. We will lose battles in the short term, and that is why it's very important to have a dual strategy. One is to try and stop harm happening right now, and the other is to try and change the foundations of the legal system so that we recognize that not just humans should be subject under the law, that all beings should have rights. And so yes, I think we'll lose some of them, but I'm still hopeful that things are moving in the right direction. Not as fast as I'd like, but still hopeful.
Thank you, Cormac. Yes, we're in this for the long game, for sure. And I also just want to note that Kathy Hessler just shared in the chat the link to Juliette's video in case folks want to watch it after the event as well. So thank you for sharing, Juliette and Kathy. We have one more question for Carol. Can you speak about how class intersects with the consumption of sea animals? This person noted that a lot of the photos you showed, some were from the New York Times, some were from more kind of kitschy local seafood restaurants, and they're curious about that kind of class distinction and how you feel like it compares with other types of meat consumption.
I think there's one of the ads showed this different class of sushi, and so she was dressed in a certain way, implying that sushi especially is something that is refined, is elegant, is I mean, it's trying to position so much of, or some of the sea animals that are sold are positioned as exotic. And I think we have to think about that. I think about this growth in interest in eating octopi, despite all these best-selling books about octopi and their consciousness and what they can do. In terms of class, one of the things that's operating with eating a mammalian flesh, red meat and everything, is that the federal government provides ways, it's almost as though meat eating in our country is one of the few socialist things our federal government does, that meat and dairy, because it provides tax relief for farmers, and it guarantees a certain price for dairy. I do not have the information to know what kind of federal subsidies in the United States help with keeping prices of consuming fishes or other sea animals down. But it seems to me that part of class is operating just by the way certain seafood or dead sea animal restaurants are operating in the way they're designed. That you're supposed to sit in front and watch someone create the sushi. All of that is creating an atmosphere of privilege. And the privilege is the point, to feel privileged. But I welcome the thoughts of Cormac and Juliette, or Kathy, any of you on this. I think it's a great question, and I don't have all the answers. I use the Times more to show how pervasive the patriarchal viewpoint is as being safe, that it was safe to have those images in the Times, more to show that this wallpaper is so pervasive.
Yes, thank you, Carol. And yeah, there's so much more that can be explored and said on that question. It's a wonderful one. And we're sadly running out of time. We have one more question, and this one is for Juliette. We're curious about any steps that attendees on this call can take to support the work that you described in your presentation, and anything that you suggest and kind of want to offer the group in terms of how we can change the way that we see and treat aquatic animals.
Thank you for that question. There are public comment periods available that are coming out. So I strongly would encourage anyone from any nonprofits or any groups here to watch those and participate in raising awareness about our aquatic animals and the harms that these dams and the canals and the whole agricultural community is having. It's such a huge problem, and I think there's really that nexus where we can really align with folks from different areas and partner. And we have allies in different spaces, even though we may not all agree with, like, I'm not vegetarian or vegan, but I respect those who are not, and we all have the same goal, but we want to protect these animals and have clean water. And I think if you can raise awareness by participating in those processes or reaching out to your local representative and raising awareness about this, because in this region, the Klamath Basin, that water, this is more than just a regional, local situation. That water goes on farms and goes to food that goes all over the world. This affects millions of people. It's a massive problem, and so I think being aware of it, and then of course, if you could choose by not purchasing those products too, right? Being mindful of looking at where it comes from and not buying those products. And those are little action steps you can take. And I personally try to do that myself, and I look to see where the food's coming from. But of course, like, people aren't telling you that the water that's going on that food is contaminated. So I think just raising awareness, talking about that connection of water quality when it comes to these farming of fish and hatcheries and all this stuff, like, it's all connected. So I think that's where we can come together and really be allies, regardless of other things that divide us. I think that common nexus is where we should focus on. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Juliette, and thank you for helping us come to a close on such a helpful and hopeful note. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we're at time, so I want to extend a huge thank you to our incredible speakers. Your insights and efforts are truly inspiring, and we're so grateful for your contributions to this conversation and for advancing how we understand and relate to and protect aquatic animals. And thank you all for joining us for the 7th annual World Aquatic Animal Day. Your participation is what makes this global virtual event so meaningful and impactful. So thank you so much for coming. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact the GW Animal Law Program. We're very much here to support the conversations that are hopefully ongoing from today's event. We also encourage you to attend the second panel of World Aquatic Animal Day, accessible both virtually, online, and in person at the GW Law School campus, which will explore the theme of from objects to subjects, transforming the way we see and treat aquatic life. And that's from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time this afternoon. We'll put the event link in the chat for more information and hope that you'll join us. The recording of this panel and the second WAD panel to come this afternoon will be available on the GW Animal Law YouTube channel. We'll post that link as well, so you can check that out and share it with your community. And finally, save the date for April 3rd, 2027, next year's World Aquatic Animal Day, which will explore the theme of digital tides, emerging technologies, and aquatic animal futures. We're looking forward to it and hope to see you there. And thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, Miranda. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Miranda.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.